Hello, and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Sports. My name is Michael Rasile. This is a show where we get to talk about sports, we get to talk about business, and we get to talk about everything in between. Wherever you're listening, however you're listening, you know exactly what to do. Like and subscribe on YouTube, like and subscribe on YouTube, like and subscribe on YouTube, 5-star review on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. Please, 5-star review and say something really nice about me and my incredible guest today. I have Stefano Vaccarino. I fucked it up already. Look at that.
You got it, Vaccarino. That's good.
Vaccarino. Stefano Vaccarino. He's the Chief Marketing Officer of FTN Network. Stefano, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Michael. I'm looking forward to it.
Pleasure is all mine. We've crossed paths once or twice in the past, so it's kind of cool to outside of work. Now we just get to talk about pleasure, Stefano, and I'm excited to do that with you, man. I think what FTN has done, what you guys are doing is so much fun. I'm excited to kind of dive into the data, the analytics, everything that you guys are doing from that standpoint, the marketing, obviously, which you oversee, and how you're getting people to pay attention to what you guys are doing, how you guys are making money. But Stefano, the first question I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast is, why do you love sports so much?
That's a good question. I never really thought about it that way. I don't know. I honestly, I would break it up between my love of sports and my sports fandom, right? Because my sports fandom is kind of honestly I love it, but it's been a miserable experience. I'm a Mets, Jets, and Nets fan, so It hasn't been great. But I guess ever since I always played sports at a very young age, and in middle school I followed every single sport. I was just always super into it. I just love it. I can't really describe it. It's like the best form of reality TV, and it's super entertaining. I just love it. That's kind of my only way to describe it. Is I just love sports. It's entertaining. It's exciting. There's emotions everywhere. And so that would be the simplest way I would answer that. It's the best form of reality TV.
I couldn't agree more, man. No offense to anybody that watches the Kardashians, but give me that double overtime hockey game last night, and I'll show you the world, right? Like it's insane. Especially now that we're in the hockey playoffs. My wife's a big Rangers fan, so I'm repping it for her. I honestly couldn't care less who wins. I used to like the Devils as a kid, so whoever wins, I'll just be rooting for them. I don't care what anyone says. I just love playoff hockey. There's nothing like it, and I totally agree, man. Like, it's so much fun being able to storylines, the athletes, their stories, who they are, where they came from, right? Especially with the NFL draft coming up pretty soon, we get a lot of those sob stories, and not sob stories, maybe that's not the best way to say it, but there's very emotional stories on where this kid came from, how he overcame X, Y, and Z, what he did on the field, injuries that they overcame. He's getting drafted. Oh my gosh, I love all that stuff, man. I am a total sap for all of that shit.
Yeah, you have to be, right? And the competitive aspect of playing sports, right? It just is exciting, and it's thrilling. And then there's that competitive nature comes out when watching sports and watching your team, and it's just the highs and lows. It's kind of like a drug, right? It's addicting. I believe you're a big Mets fan too, so
yes.
We've experienced similar, misery and also some good times as a Mets fan.
Hey man, I was at the World Series in 2015. I was at the one game that they won. Noah Syndergaard, 60 feet 6 inches, meet me out on the mound. David Wright hits a dinger. I think Cespedes hit a dinger. Might have cried a little bit when David Wright hit that one. Obviously, my favorite player growing up, right? And then obviously, first team to blow 3 saves in the World Series. So it was 4-1. But I tell every Royals fan, all 3 of them that I ever met, it was a lot closer than we remember. I want you guys to know that.
And I think pundits are a little hard on yours, familiar too. He blew 3 saves, but it wasn't entirely on him.
No, I think Lucas Duda might have had a bad throw. Daniel Murphy played the field. Ruben Tejada lost a leg. That was the series before. But we don't, Stefano, we don't need to do that. I do this too much to myself every time I watch the Mets, just about every night. So I want to play a little game with you before we jump into FTN, and you talk about that competitive nature. We get to talk about sports betting. We can talk about fantasy, daily fantasy. But I want to play a little game first. Tell me which one of these is not like the other. Ironworker, certified medical biller, and marketing director of an NBA DFS sports betting tool. I'm just going to throw those 3 out there, totally random. Which one of those is not like the other, Stefano?
I would say they're all different from each other.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. The last one's pretty out there in my opinion. But no, man, I say that only because looking in, researched a little bit when I like to do these, and I saw on your LinkedIn you had a couple interesting careers prior to getting into sports, prior to getting in the data, the analytics, the marketing side of sports betting and fantasy sports. How'd you get here? Because I think a lot of people want to know that, because a lot of people want to work in sports, and you have such a unique background. I think someone can see you somewhere in their story, right?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start all the way back, right? Just right out of college, I had a family connection to get me into a local union for ironworkers, and I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I just knew ironworkers made a lot of money, and
There
I
you
was
go.
like, you know what, that's not a bad job right out of college, except it was a bad job because I was working 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. every single day, 7 days a week, but made really good money, right?
Hey,
So that
I
was just
hope.
that was just like a yeah. That was just a summer job right out of college because I honestly didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then I basically took a job that was just like your boring office job, right? And I was making sure doctors were making money. I was doing medical coding, just medical RCM services, and just management, right, of all their patients and collections, and wasn't the most fun job. And so then, this was right at the time when DFS started kind of blowing up in like 2014, maybe a little earlier than that. And my love of sports, right? I was always following sports, and I started playing DFS, specifically NBA DFS, and I was pretty good at it. And I was bored at work, and I was like, it would be fun to kind of create a Twitter handle and just tweet out picks. And I don't know, I just did it because I was bored at work, and I would tweet out during my lunch breaks. And so I tried to pick like the cheesiest like sports betting handle of all time, and as a joke, right? Because I thought this would be nothing, right? I wasn't expecting anything out of it. So I chose the handle on Twitter at Big Money Play, which I've kept just for nostalgic reasons. I should
Love
probably
it.
change it to a more professional
Absolutely not, dude. That's awesome.
one. And so I started actually picking up a little bit of a following, and randomly someone I went to college with, and followed me, and he had no idea it was me because here I am, like nervous that I'm going to get caught tweeting at work. So it wasn't my real name. I had a picture of a cat with like dollars and like a chain on as my icon. So it didn't lead back to me at all, right? Because I was worried I was going to get caught tweeting at work. And he followed me, and he was like, he was giving out like advice about the NFL and stuff. And we were friends in college, and we kind of lost touch out of college. And so I actually didn't DM him right away, because this is like ridiculous to say out loud now, 10 years after the fact, but I was like, I don't want anyone to know it's me. What if he tells my job that I'm not actually working, like as if he's ever going to do that, or there's any connection there whatsoever. But eventually, right, somehow I mustered up the courage after a couple weeks, and I DM'd him. I was like, hey, it's Stefano from St. Joe's. How you doing? Like, it's good to connect again. And we just started kind of going back and forth talking. And then fast forward, maybe like 6 months after that, he DM'd me saying, I took a job at this startup as their chief product officer, and we're going to launch an MBA product, and I think you should apply for the job. I think it's a bit of a long shot because you're not in this space and whatever, but I think you should apply. You really know the MBA well. So I applied, right? And I went through the interview process. I did 3 interviews. They all went well. And it was down to me and this one other guy. And they picked the other guy. And they were right to pick the other guy because I was at Big Money Play with 2K followers on Twitter. No one knew who I was. And this was a guy who had a Sirius XM radio show with like 25,000 followers. So they made the right choice. Except he ended up turning down the job at the last minute. And so there I was, able to take that job. And that was my entry point into the industry. And so I was the MBA product manager for the Quant Edge. Was there for about 2.5 years, and essentially there, like I was in charge of building betting models and working with quants to build betting models and build an MBA product. And part of that, right, was I wanted to learn how to market digitally, right? I wanted to, you're in startup culture, right? You wear many hats. And I felt it was like my responsibility to grow the product, and this was, I thought, a good way to grow the product. And so I learned Google ads and Facebook ads and Twitter ads and everything on my own, and was seeing a lot of like really, really strong success. It wasn't because of COVID, but about like 3 weeks before everything like shut down, that company actually kind of went under, and I got laid off. And so there I was like, all right, well, this was a really good entry point into the industry I want to be in. I was thinking about starting my own business because I knew how to buy traffic essentially, and valuable traffic, and I knew how to like convert that traffic. So I was like, I can start up maybe like an affiliate site or a sports betting site, and run some ads and get people to come to my site. And then I linked up with Kevin Adams, who's the CEO of FTN, and he was telling me like he was starting this project, and he had this big audience that I didn't have, but they needed someone like me. And so March of 2020 when all sports shut down, we were like, hey, let's start a big sports betting company, right? Perfect time.
I love it, dude.
That's when FTN officially started kind of being official, right? It was in March of 2020. We launched July in 2020.
Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with the product, with the site. I actually worked at a different DFS type content site at the time, so it was very interesting to kind of see how everything was unfolding. And yeah, man, like I kind of got into the space of DFS sports betting around that March of 2020 timeframe too, because hey, once sports came back, we had nothing to do as like a society. So I mean, that's how I started watching soccer. Now I love soccer. I used to hate it. Now I love it. I watch any soccer game I can because it was the one sport that came back. It was the first sport that came back. I remember Bundesliga at like 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd wake up on Saturdays and I just wanted to see green grass on my TV, man. Like that's what I was missing, and like that got me into soccer, and then that got me into DFS, and then once everything else started coming back, you're still just sitting on the couch, like you can't really go out. So I'll throw $5 on the game. I'll throw $10 on this prop and this parlay, and that's kind of how I believe it. A lot of people got into sports betting specifically around that time because we were all stuck inside and we all saw the advertisements. But I also believe it allowed states to, because of the pandemic, many states then wanted to legalize it as quickly as possible because they spent so much friggin' money with PPP and with, I mean, that was federal, but like with unemployment and all the things that were going on, the states were just hemorrhaging money. How do we flip a switch and make $500 million? Well, here you go, legalize gambling, and now it's obviously swept the nation the last 3 years, and I'm grateful to be working in this space, man. But I think, I wanted to hear your story because I think it's so important for people to understand, like, just because you work somewhere else and you're not the biggest fan of what you do, like, take a leap of faith like you did. We're going to work for a startup. I'm sure you could have had that cushy job doing medical billing or coding or whatever the hell you were doing, as you said, making doctors money. But instead, you wanted to go out and do something a little different, which I think is cool, man. So kudos. Congratulations.
Yep. And to like one more point on top of that, expand your skill set, right? Like, that I think that's the most important thing, especially if like you want to kind of switch industries into an industry that you're passionate about. You're going to expect to make less money right off the bat, right? That's just a sacrifice you have to like. Well, not for everyone, but most people will have to make that sacrifice. But then also learn new skills, and you never know what those skills can develop into, or if you find a new passion through those skills.
Yeah, and I would even add on to that transferable skills, right? Twitter ads are Twitter ads are Twitter ads. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. Obviously, gambling's a little different because there's some restrictions and shit that go on, but a Twitter ad's a Twitter ad. If you know how to run, Twitter ads, you're going to be valuable wherever you go. Just depends on the industry you want to get into, and gambling's the one that we found ourselves in, so it could be a lot worse, right? So kudos, man. That is awesome. And so you eventually, you get laid off by the Quant Edge. I'm familiar. I didn't really dive too deep into that product. I knew about it. I wasn't the biggest, I didn't utilize the product, but I do remember when it unfortunately did go under, so that kind of sucks. But it's cool that you quickly then came out of it. What was it like going from one startup to essentially going to another? Was there any hesitation, or because the whole world was kind of just sitting there with our, twiddling our thumbs, you were like, whatever, who cares if it's a startup? I need a job.
Honestly, there was no hesitation because what we actually did at TQE, and I'll shout out my buddy Elliot, who's actually now the CEO of Fantasy Life. He's the person I connected with on Twitter, right? Who
I have spoken with Elliot a couple times. Incredible dude.
And TQE was working. We were things were working, and I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, right? But I think there were some poor decisions that were made, which kind of led to essentially what happened to it. And that was kind of a proof of concept. We were growing. We knew, I knew what I was doing was working. And this, FTN was TQE with 100x times the audience, right? That's a huge starting point and super, super helpful. So I was very confident that, this could work, essentially. And so I didn't view it as much risk. It was also, it was a great time to kind of try something new because, again, everyone was at home. Think about, everyone says they work unlimited hours, right? They grind, but actually, during COVID, there was literally nothing else to do, right? We were locked in, especially in the East Coast. And so I was like, let's do it, right? I just thought it was a perfect time. I wasn't worried about sort of failing or having joining another startup that might fail. I'm aware that's a huge possibility. 90+% of startups end up eventually failing anyway. But it's fun kind of going after that dream, right? Going trying to make it, and then once you start seeing success, especially from something like you've grown from the beginning, it's super, super rewarding. So I kind of really love the startup culture. So I was not worried about going from one to the next. My wife maybe preferred if it was a more stable job, but for me, I was okay with it.
That's a really good point. Yeah, let's not forget about the wives and the husbands and the significant others in the situation too, because obviously some things take. And I was recently laid off a couple months ago. My wife wasn't the biggest fan of that. Obviously, I landed on my feet. Don't worry about me. I'm just fine. But she, for a little while, she's like, "Hey, we're having a kid. Like, what you getting a job?" So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, we're here now, and that's all that matters. So, talk to us a little bit about like what exactly is FTN. Like, I've used the site, I've used the product, I know what it is, but tell the audience a little bit about what you guys do and why you do it.
Sure, I'll kind of give like the story of what we are, because I think it's a good way to kind of explain it, because we do so many different things. So kind of going back to July of 2020, right? I would actually say June of 2020. We're ready to launch these 3 subscription service sites, premium subscription service sites. There's FTNFantasy.com, FTNDaily.com, and FTNBets.com. And we wanted this to be a very like analytical driven subscription, and so we needed an advanced NFL data, right, to fuel our projections, to fuel some of our models. And so we were looking for an advanced NFL data package, and they were just all so expensive. And we were bootstrapping this company, and we didn't want to spend $20,000 for an advanced NFL data package, so we were looking for other options, and we stumbled upon this company called Armchair Analysis, who did have affordable data. They had the charted data that we were looking for, like super, super advanced niche NFL data. And we kind of got the sense from this guy that this was just his hobby, and he was like looking to stop doing it. He was just a guy in Canada who just loved charting NFL, right? And so instead of buying a data package a month before we were ready to launch 3 sites I've been working on, we ended up buying a data company.
There you go.
And so that was a quick pivot before we officially launched. So then here we are, okay, like, oh shit, we still need to launch. We're still bootstrapping it. We need some sort of revenue. We did just purchase this data company, but it's super valuable. So we were like, okay, let's see what we have with the data company. Let's service all of his existing clients. It wasn't like a huge client list, so it was doable. And let's focus our attention on the 3 B2C sites. And so launched those sites, grew those sites over that year on the data side. Essentially saw what was under the hood, and as you can imagine, some of it was some data technology that needed to be revamped. We needed to stabilize the API, and instead of just kind of patching things, we ended up just redoing everything, right? So we're like, okay, we have the 20 years of historical NFL data. That's great, and that's what we needed, right? But let's advance. Let's build essentially a master tool and a stronger API so we can support more clients. We'll be more efficient for our clients, and we can kind of do anything we want. So we spent about a year and a half building that master tool and strengthening the API. And to the point where actually this past NFL season was really our first test season under sort of our new technology. And we were all like kind of nervous about it. Like, all right, are we ready? Are we ready? And one of our developers, the managing director of FTN Data, Frank Brink, I'll shout him out. He accidentally sent 5 million calls to our API, and it didn't crash. And we're like, okay, I think we're ready. We're good.
Sweet.
Strong.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, perfect. And so, so this past NFL season was essentially our, we were testing our product essentially. We got a couple of new clients, but we weren't really looking to push for new clients. We were just making sure, okay, this is our charting system. This is our technology. Do they both work? Does everyone have the system down? Are we efficient? Are we overspending? Blah blah blah. Right? And then it went well. So essentially, this next NFL season is our first go-to-market season around FTN data, and that's kind of where FTN is pivoting. Where we're still going to have our 3 B2C sites, but our most of our attention is on that data side and really building out a data company with really the concept of offering affordable and super reliable premium data, right? And just because we're selling our data at a cheaper price point than some of our competitors does not make it worse. It's actually, I would argue, it's more accurate with more data that's available. But we were in that position as a startup looking to buy an advanced NFL data package, and everything was just so expensive. We saw a gap in that market, and that's the gap we're trying to fill.
That's awesome. And obviously, so I'm not familiar with the data side of things, obviously, but I'm more invested in and interested, or I have been in the past in the B2C side of things. if this is now your pivot, right? As you said, you're going to still have the B2C side of things. You have all this incredible data. Now you guys can use it, right? How, so I have a couple questions, so I want to make sure I do this in the correct order. Who do you sell the data to? Who's buying the data? Like, I guess that's a really good question to start with.
Yeah, so anyone, right? So even though like we're focusing our attention on a lot of startups who maybe aren't well funded, like Caesars is the client of ours. Caesars Sportsbook buys our data. Better Collective buys our data, and then we have companies, and I think they're great companies, right? Not to diminish them because they're smaller, but like IDP guys, right? They buy our data. DFS Army buys our data, and so there's different sort of, it's a huge scale, right? And everyone's kind of treated the same, and it's a more personalized experience on our end. Not to try and sound overly salesy, but like that's sort of what we're pushing for, right? Because like for these larger like data shops, it's almost like, I don't know if you're a fan of The Office. I assume you are, because everyone's a fan of The Office. But it's like kind of that expression, like it's like Dunder Mifflin wants to give that personalized experience that those big shops don't give, and we're sort of providing that on the data side. Where like you send an email to a large shop, they're not really too helpful. Our guys are working with you to make sure, like we'll build you custom feeds to make sure you get exactly what you need, so it's as efficient as possible. So if you like, you can buy our raw data dump, which is totally fine. But if you want us to sort of partially clean the data so it's more efficient and easier for you guys to organize, we're happy to do that as well.
What do they use the data for? And look, without getting super specific about any particular client, like so they're buying this data. All these different companies are buying this data from one of the biggest casino conglomerates on planet Earth, and Caesars to, as you said, some smaller companies. What are they using this data for in, I guess, general sense?
Yeah, I would say everyone uses it differently. Some sports books, right, might use our projections to help set their lines, even though a lot of people use the same company for their lines.
Yeah.
But if everyone's using the same data, there's no real edge, right? Even if like a projection is a yard off or a point off or a quarter point off, that actually makes a huge difference in setting those lines. And so I see like that for sports books. I think that's mostly what they would use it for. I guess for blogs or sites like FTN Fantasy Daily or Bets, I'll kind of talk about them because essentially the biggest client of FTN data is FTN Fantasy Daily and Bets. And so we use them we have a suite of tools, right? So we'll have a pace and play calling tool, which because we have all this charted data, we're able to know the exact situation of a game. Let's say the Jets are playing the Giants, and the Jets are down 10 points with 10 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. We know exactly what the Jets or the Giants do on an offensive and defensive perspective, from a defensive or offensive perspective, in that exact scenario. So do they run the ball? How often do they run the ball? Who do they get the ball to? What type of defense do they call? Is it zone? Is it man? How often do they run play action? How fast do they run plays? Like are they how much no huddle? We also use that data, right? Because part of these tools then influence our betting models, our projection models, and also build kind of tools that spin off of each other. A new tool that we just launched in FTN Bets, for example, is using some of that data for same game parlays, right? Like, as someone who's supposed to give good betting advice, I'm not going to recommend everyone taking same game parlays because it's not a good bet. However, people are doing them, right? So let's find a way to make sure they're getting a better bet for it. And so we built a tool using our own data to project true odds of a same game parlay. So you insert your same game parlay, and based off of our projections, our betting models, which run like 100,000 simulations of each game, will tell you like what sort of correlation you have and the true odds of your same game parlay. So you build something on FanDuel where FanDuel is offering it for plus 1,200, right? And we think it should be plus 1,600. Okay, that as maybe a same game parlay that's worth placing where you're actually getting some value.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, same game parlays. I work for a book. I've been doing this thing for a long time. I know not to do it, and I still play same game parlays too. They're fun, man.
They're fun,
like,
yeah.
The Super Bowl, we all had a couple on come on. We're here to have a good time, right? Gambling's an entertainment. You're not supposed to make money doing it unless you work with the guys over at FTN. Maybe they can help you out a bit. So I think that's awesome, the way that you guys have been able to kind of be able to not just, like, it's such an interesting, right? I appreciate you telling the story in the beginning, right? Because you easily could have just got that $20,000 package and did what you did, but instead you realized, hey, let's buy the data. We own the data. okay, now we have to revamp, how the data is set up and, the warehouse and, all those data engineering terms. Oh, and now, shit, we can sell this now. And we probably make a pretty penny selling it because it's so valuable and we have so much invested in it. And there's so much of it, as you said, very high quality data scrubbed, given in a way that people can actually utilize. Again, going back to, a giant casino is buying your data. Obviously, it's some pretty good shit. So, and I know the guys over at Caesars spent some time there, good people. But I think it's really interesting how you've been able to realize that pivot. Is it now you as a chief marketing officer? You have multiple different avenues, right? You have the B2B, you have the B2C in the terms of your subscriptions. You also have the B2C in terms of the affiliate revenue, which we can touch on a little bit. That's where our paths have crossed in the path. How, when you kind of look over your suite of revenue, your streams of revenue, I guess it's a better way to say it, how are you determining the strategy for each? Because it's not the same for all of them, especially at least the B2B, the B2C side, right? How are you kind of looking at each of these as almost their separate own business unit? How are you as the chief marketing officer deciding the strategies for all these different revenue streams?
Yeah, so it's completely separate from the B2B side to the B2C side. The B2C side obviously has some synergy, and I'll start there. And I can't speak for every single company, but for us specifically, right, we have such a large fantasy football audience. And thanks to Jeff Ratcliffe, right, who's on SiriusXM radio 2 hours every single day, and he's also on CBS fantasy shows every Sunday morning. That's a super great entry point at the top end of the funnel, right? And for our top end of the funnel on the B2C side, there's organic social, there's obviously Jeff's on SiriusXM, there's SEO, which is something that we really, really strongly prioritize. I think it's the most important thing for any kind of small business or big business to prioritize to really scale. And there's paid for clicks, right? And so for us, right, we have that fantasy audience. We're most known on the B2C side for our fantasy audience. We don't have to compete with sports books for conversions on that fantasy audience. And even though we're not competing with this we're not like a competitor to DraftKings or FanDuel, we're partners. We're still their ad spend is still competing with our ad spend for that same person. So our entry point, right, and what we try and do is we try and target as many fantasy football players as possible, get them into our basically conversion funnel on the fantasy side, get them to convert, and then through email retargeting campaigns, pop-ups, banner ads on our sites, and even in our content where we try and educate fantasy football players on daily fantasy sports and sports betting with the hopes that if they are new to either, right, and they're going to try to make that jump, they will make that jump within FTN. So, kind of even digging down deeper, a really important KPI internally for me is how many purchases we get per purchaser. And that's because we want to get that fantasy user at that lowest cost essentially for us, and then convert them to other packages on other sites. On the data side, there's honestly not a ton to share because it's actually new to me. On the marketing on the B2B side, running ads on Facebook, running ads on Google aren't going to be as successful on the B2B side. It's really about connections and just kind of getting yourself out there. What we've been doing is going to a lot of conferences, which has been super helpful in getting a lot of intros that way. But really, we'll need to, and we're in the process of doing it, really develop kind of an old school sales team, right? That's sort of kind of what we need to do on the data side.
Yeah, man. SBC. I assume I'll see you there. So
absolutely.
We'll make sure to shake hands. That'll always be fun. But no, I think it's such a juxtaposition, right, from one to the other. But they both obviously are extremely important to your business, and you need to kind of push both of them forward. So going back to the B2C side, I love the way that you think of it. It's okay, I want to understand the cost it takes for me to bring one player into our funnel. However, where they end up first is fine. And then how many times can we convert them? A little inside baseball for people on the affiliate side. You want that one person to convert for multiple books, right? It's actually good for the players to understand that. That's one thing that I will always suggest. Have as many books as you can because you always should shop lines because that's how you actually have a little bit more of an edge with these books in sports betting. But so you want to have that person, convert to one of your paid subscriptions. That would be awesome, right? Because then you have a little bit more loyalty, a little bit more hold. And then you want them to convert on as many sports books as you can because then you can pay them this person multiple times. And hey, if it costs $100 to bring that person in, whatever the subscription is, plus whatever those affiliate, that customer could be very, very valuable to you guys, and I'm sure you guys understand that. So understanding that and getting that data and that piece of information, I think, is extremely important. And yeah, man, shaking hands and kissing babies, right? Like that's what it comes down to on the data side. It's you got to know the right people. It's about decision makers. It's about networking, right? It's kind of that old school like partnership mentality, and I think that's the way you got to go about it. There's really no other way to do it. You're not cold emailing, the CMO of one of these companies being like, you should buy my data. It's like, no, that's not quite how it works. This is, let's take our time. Take me out to dinner. How about that? Let's start taking me out to dinner first.
Yeah, no, exactly. And to kind of your point on the affiliate side, what's nice about like the model kind of we set up for our subscription side is it does correlate really well to our affiliate side, right? Where, most people, like you think, okay, most people would think, okay, we have FTNBets.com, which focuses on sports betting. That's where we're going to get the majority of our new signups. But the majority of people who are signing up for FTNBets.com have already signed up for sportsbooks. They're not new sports bettors. Trying to target those fantasy football people with the assumption that, with the assumption that they haven't signed up for sportsbooks or they're not sports bettors. That's how you kind of get those new signups, from areas where maybe aren't actually sports betting related.
How have you seen that in practice, specifically the success side of it, right? Like back in 2020 when I was working at a similar company, again, one of our things was like, let's focus on sports betting, and everything we're going to do is we're going to tie it back to the projection model, and we're going to say, oh, and by the way, these are all the books that you can get this line at. This is the book where you get the best line at, so take it here. Oh, and you haven't signed up for this book yet? Cool, sign up for this link. You'll get this offer, and then you can take the best line on this best prop, right? That was kind of the way we thought about it. I don't know if you guys think of it a different way or if there's a better way or if there's a more direct way, like, because I think that's such an easy way for getting people on the DFS side, the fantasy side, that only care about, their 10, 12 players that they have going every week. It's like, well, your lineup might not be great, right? Because your third string tight end that you kind of punted on didn't do that well, but you had Justin Jefferson and he had 15 catches. I hope you took the over 8.5, right?
Yeah. It's super interesting. For us, we've done it. We've iterated a ton, right, on the affiliate side, and it's actually when we launched, right, in 2020, we thought the affiliate side was going to be a huge priority for us, and it actually hasn't. We've kind of scaled down we scaled it down from like our I guess, revenue priority list. And I think that's been a good call based on kind of what we've seen recently over the past 6 months with all the sportsbooks kind of lowering their offers, lowering their CPAs to clients like FTN, and even some states just saying you can't flat out market, like
that's
like
not
Ohio.
Great.
Yeah. So what we did is, we tried to prioritize SEO, right? And this is specifically on the affiliate side. And there was just so much competition. We were kind of late to the game. And so we were then trying to prioritize like less searched keywords. Maybe it would just be Jets, Giants, week 7 rather than best player props or something like that. And that had some success. Then we essentially, this is now more towards the subscription side, which we then which kind of correlates with this, is our fantasy content included gambling education, essentially. So
Thank you.
We
need more gambling education in this country. Thank you.
And so we were essentially, in our best waiver wire pickups, right, we would mention sports betting, right, and a link to FTN bets, but also in that column talk about, hey, if you're new to sports betting, this is what this means. And it wouldn't change what the article was about. It would just be a slight reference in multiple columns. And we actually saw those clicked over well to FTNbets.com, where then someone would click on, okay, what is a parlay, or betting 101, or understanding sports betting, right? Some of those kind of that generic evergreen content. On the affiliate side, where we really saw the most of our success, and you might actually know this when we kind of worked together, is when we got approved to promote Real Money Gaming on Facebook and Google, which is like a big deal for us. We were able to just run geo-targeted ads that were pumping sports books in specific locations. So if a new site went live, we would dump some money into Facebook ads and target people in that state to sign up for sports books based off their offers. It's really hard to get approved for Real Money Gaming. I know a lot of people are trying to do it right now, and they're not having success for it. So that's something that we've valued a lot, and honestly have shifted almost our entire affiliate focus to that. So when a new state goes live, we'll be ready to run ads in that state, and we saw the highest conversion bang for our buck with that.
I believe that. Yeah, man, that's awesome. And look at that. It's things that you learned all the way back in the olden days. Isn't that funny how they rear their head again, man? I think it's awesome again how you guys are thinking of and utilizing the data, the analytics, how you're specifically marketing these products, and really understanding like, hey, sometimes it takes an actual handshake. Sometimes we have to understand we have this awesome upper hand in terms of real money gaming advertising on Facebook. Let's absolutely hammer it, as you said, or dump a bunch of money, I think were your words that you used. And so I always like, so I appreciate the explanation. I love what you're doing. I think it's awesome. So we'll make sure to add, we'll put all the links in the description. We'll put all that shit down there. But one thing, I always just like talking to people in the industry. It's an industry that I've been a part of for 3 years now. I'm very interested in it. I think it is so much fun, right? We've only been live for 5 years and change at this point. Is it? No, 5 years in May, right? 18 to 23. Yeah, so 5 years in May. May 13th, 18th. I can't remember off the top of my head, but shout out Governor Christie, the one thing that he did here in New Jersey that we're all very proud of. It's very interesting, right? So we saw that, blitz in 2014, 2015. We talked a little bit about with DraftKings and FanDuel. If you want a really good book, anybody out there, $1 Billion Fantasy, it talks about the FanDuel, DraftKings, and actually there was a third company, Draft Street, that was they were on the ground. They were doing everything they could to get all this stuff going. So very, very interesting book if you're interested in just kind of the behind the scenes shit that happened before we got to where we are now. Then we had sports betting, and now we kind of have this like weird middle ground, we'll call it. I know I asked you, prior to coming on what we called them, but the prize picks, the monkey knife fights, the Thrive Fantasies, like I have nothing against these companies. I'm not trying to pin one over, out, but it is the most bullshit opinion. Like the fact that these companies, which are essentially just parlays, which is, as we've talked about already, Stefano, the worst type of gambling. These companies that are just parlays somehow aren't considered gambling. They're considered DFS. So then they're legal in like 48 states when, companies like Barstool, Caesars, DraftKings were limited to 15 or 16, whatever, 17, 18, whatever the number is now. What is that? Like, how do they skirt this? Like, in your opinion, as a smart guy understanding the industry, like what's going on here?
So, I mean, it's kind of evolved, but when they first started, right, you couldn't bet on props specifically. You'd bet on fantasy scores, or there'd be tournaments where you don't win your money off the prop. You pick 10 props, and whoever picked the most props right won that tournament, right? And so like at first it wasn't like there was a clear difference, right? There were parlays, but you were betting fantasy point over unders, parlays essentially, right? And then I think like Monkey Knife Fight put out like, I think when they came out with their product, it became more prop oriented, where it's like, okay, it wasn't, am I betting over 7.5 assists for LeBron James? It was, is LeBron James or Anthony Davis going to have more assists than LeBron James, or Anthony Davis is like plus 4.5 in whatever, like to make it, to have some sort of, I guess, spread for picking these props. Now it's really hard to establish the difference. It really is, because it is essentially just, they're just player parlays, and you can't correlate them either, because like it's actually the one benefit to same game parlays is you can build correlated same game parlays for these fantasy prop games. You can't build correlated same game parlays. They have to be different games, unless that's changed. I haven't dived into them in a bit, but I don't think that it has. I'm not sure, honestly. I mean, it's a game of skill, right? Not chance.
Yeah.
That's how I think legally. That's how it's phrased. It's a mystery to me right now.
Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I don't know like what your opinion on it. I don't want you to have to bash any of your partners that are, of course, right? Like that's not what I'm here to do. That one just still blows my mind. The fact that you see the people on on Twitter, gambling Twitter, and like. I'd almost say like it's split between these DFS games like Prize Picks of the world and actual gambling now, because it's that you can put 5 of these together and it's like 20 times, like, oh my god, that's so cool. It's like, yeah, no shit, but you're not going to win. There's a reason why they're giving 20 times your money, because you're not going to win. And now everybody wins on Twitter, which I love. I absolutely love that. But it's just one of those things. Like, I don't know how that's legal, and I've had conversations with other people in the industry. They're blown away by it too, but it is what it is. I have nothing against these companies. Do what you do. I think gambling should be legal in every single state, so I'm for it. It's just frustrating to me as someone who's like, again, I thank you before for the education on gambling. I've seen it like firsthand, like the very limited understanding of what people are actually betting on, and it's borderline scary depending on how much money they're putting on these things. And like, we need people to understand what exactly is going on, why those numbers are the way they are, what the actual odds of these things happening are, because if the book's willing to give you that much money, that means there's a really good chance they're going to win. That's what it comes down to. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, and I will say, as someone, so I live in New York, and so sports betting is legal now, but I was jealous of my neighbors in Jersey when it was legal there and it was legal here. And we got Prize Picks, we had Monkey Knife Fight, we had Underdog to go to. So grateful that I had that available to me. That said, though, it's just confusing. Like, and it's kind of like, not to make anything like political or anything like that, but it's just like, what are like legislators doing, or like what are they identifying, like that there's a huge difference, or like why is one sort of frowned upon? Because it's not just about like gambling. From a business perspective, like, because like it's harder to work with a bank because we're considered sports betting rather than fantasy, right? There's more to it than just, okay, is it legal to play this fantasy game in this state or not? If you're trying to build a business in this space, being on the betting side makes it overly complicated because of sort of niche language that doesn't make any sense, that should just be rectified anyway.
Shout out the lawmakers. They're always doing the best jobs that they possibly can, and I truly believe that. Awesome, man. No, this was great, Stefano. I really appreciate it. One more time, Stefano Vaccarino. Can we throw a little sauce on that? Is that cool?
Yeah,
Vaccarino?
I'm all good with the sauce, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll do that. Chief Marketing Officer of FTN Network. Where can we find a little bit more about you? Where can we follow you, your stuff, and then all the FTN stuff? Let us know where we can follow all that shit too.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter. You can search Stefano Vaccarino, or again, I've kept at Big Money Play, so you can find
Big
me
Money
at
Plays.
Big
Thank
Money
you.
Play.
Yeah, 100%.
As I become more and more of a professional in this industry, I think that's the one thing I'm going to hold down. So I'm never going to change it to my actual name. I got to keep it just for
100%. Is the cat still your avatar?
No, I actually, but believe it or not, I kept it as my avatar like 6 months into starting my job at TQE. And eventually, Elliot was like, "Hey, you need to put a real picture of yourself."
Hey, man, yeah, like you could keep the name, but like, just put a picture out. Okay, I respect that. I get that.
Yeah. I don't. Bad decision. Anyway, follow me at Big Money Play on Twitter, or find me on LinkedIn at Stefano Vaccarino. That I do keep professional. Just feel free to DM me if you want to email me, Stefano at FTN Network. I'm a big fan of kind of just intros, right? So if you just want to connect or have a question or anything, feel free to reach out. And obviously, you can find, if you're a fantasy football player, you can find us at ftnfantasy.com. If you're a DFS player, you can find us at ftndaily.com. And if you're a sports bettor, you can find us at ftnbets.com.
I love
or
it,
if you want data, find us at ftndata.com. Sorry, I got to fix the last one too.
No. We'll get all those in the description for anyone, so we can make it an easy click out with the link, man. But no, this was awesome. I appreciate you telling your story. Obviously, the story of FTN, what you guys have been up to, and kind of how we got here with these multiple revenue streams, what you've been able to build out, and kind of the happy accident almost with the data side of the business, which sounds like that's now going to be a major focus, as you said, moving forward, which I think is just so cool. So, no, man, this was great. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the audience's time. Time is the only thing we don't get more of, so thank you very much for that. But other than that, man, appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your day, man. All right. Bye, everybody.